My son didn't push me down the stairs by accident. I know that now. But the moment it happened, I believed him the way you believe someone you raised, someone you held when he was too small to hold himself up, someone who called you every Sunday morning for 40 years. That is the cruelest thing about betrayal inside a family. It doesn't arrive wearing a stranger's face. It was a Tuesday in October when I fell. That's what I called it for weeks of fall. My right hip shattered on the third step from the bottom. I remember the sound more than the pain. A crack. The kind that makes the room go quiet. And then, my son's voice above me, calling my name. Just a half second too late. His wife was standing at the kitchen doorway. I saw her face when I looked up from the floor. She wasn't frightened. She was watching. I spent 11 days in the hospital. 11 days in a bed that smelled like antiseptic and someone else's misery, while my son told me not to worry. He would handle everything. He would take care of the house, the bills, the accounts. He'd already spoken to my financial advisor, he said. He'd already spoken to my doctor. He had already. That word should have warned me. But I was 72 and my hip was in pieces and I was tired in a way that goes past the body into the bones of who you are. I didn't know, lying in that hospital bed, that while I was being helped to the bathroom and measured for a walker, my son had already filed paperwork giving himself control of everything I owned. My house, my retirement accounts, the insurance settlement from when his father died 8 years ago, the money I swore I'd never touch because it felt like touching a wound. All of it, signed over to him in documents he claimed I'd authorized, documents with my signature on them, a signature I never wrote. That's the thing about a forged name. It looks like you, but it doesn't feel like you. And I know my own handwriting the way I know my own face. I found out by accident, the way most truths surface not through heroic searching, but through a small, ordinary mistake someone forgot to cover. A letter arrived at the hospital addressed to me. My son had been redirecting my mail to his house for weeks, but this one slipped through. A notice from my bank informing me that a wire transfer of $340,000 had been initiated from my primary savings account. The recipient account was a name I didn't recognize, a holding company with no address. I read that letter 3 times. Then I folded it, slid it under my pillow, and lay very still for a long time. The machines beeped. A nurse walked past my door. Somewhere down the hall, a television played at low volume. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I am not a woman who cries when the ground shifts. I learned that from 31 years of teaching middle school in rural Indiana, and from raising 2 children after my husband's accident left him unable to work for 4 years, and from standing at his graveside, while our son, standing right beside me, was already calculating the life insurance. I didn't know that last part then, but looking back, I can see the math behind his eyes. I pressed the call button for my nurse. Her name was Della, a woman in her late 40s with the steady hands of someone who had seen people at their worst and decided to show up anyway. When she came in, I asked her to close the door. "Della," I said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." She sat down, which told me she understood this wasn't a question about medication. "Has my son been here every day?" "He has," she said carefully. "He and his wife. They usually come in the morning, before you're fully awake. Have they ever asked to speak to my doctor without me in the room?" A pause. "Once," she said. "Early on. They asked about your cognitive function, whether the fall might have affected your memory, your ability to make decisions." I looked at the ceiling for a moment. The fluorescent light buzzed faintly. "Thank you," I said. She didn't leave right away. She sat there a moment longer with the particular stillness of a woman who wants to say something but hasn't been asked yet. "Mrs. Hargrove," she said finally, "I don't usually do this, but the morning of your fall, your son called the hospital. about 2 hours before the ambulance brought you in. He called and asked about our policies regarding patients who arrive without family present, whether we contact next of kin automatically. I turned my head and looked at her. He called before I fell? She nodded once. After she left, I lay there for a long time. Outside my window, the sky was doing what October skies do in Indiana, turning that particular gray that isn't storm and isn't sunshine, but something heavy in between. I thought about the staircase. I thought about how the rug on that third step had always been slightly loose. I had mentioned it to my son twice over the summer. He kept saying he'd take care of it. He did take care of it, just not the way I'd asked. I didn't call the police from that hospital room. I know that's the first thing people wonder, why not? Why wait? The reason is this. My son's closest friend from college is a detective with the county sheriff's office. I had watched them hunt together every November for 30 years. I knew what would happen if I made a call from a hospital bed with a shattered hip and no documents in my hand except one redirected letter. I knew what words like confused and elderly and cognitive decline can do to a woman's credibility when a charming man with a firm handshake is standing in the room beside her. I needed to be standing before I said a word. It took me 3 more days to get there. Not standing in the literal sense, I still had the walker and would for months, but standing in the sense that matters. I got my nephew on the phone, my late husband's youngest brother's son, a quiet man named Ray who worked as a paralegal in Indianapolis and had always written me birthday cards in his own handwriting. I told him to call my bank manager directly, a woman named Connie who had handled my accounts for 14 years. I told him to ask her, without my son's knowledge, to freeze all outgoing transactions until I could come in person. He didn't ask me why. That was worth more than he knew. My son came that evening with a bag of groceries and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He sat in the chair beside my bed and talked about my recovery and about how he'd been managing the house, how he'd had the furnace checked, how he'd found some old paperwork I'd been meaning to sort through, just trying to help. Mom, you know how it is. He talked the way people talk when they're filling silence, because silence might give something away. I watched his face while he spoke. I had looked at that face for 44 years. I knew every version of it, the boy who broke Mrs. Patterson's window and couldn't look me in the eye for a week, the teenager who cried at his grandfather's funeral and pretended he wasn't, the man who shook my hand at his wedding instead of hugging me and called it maturity. I knew that face, and I saw, behind the smile, behind the easy words, the faint outline of someone waiting for a phone call that would tell him an old woman's accounts were finally fully his. I'm tired, I said. He left. I was discharged on a Friday morning. My son was there to pick me up, his wife beside him in the passenger seat. She didn't get out of the car. She waved at me through the window with a small, bright gesture, the kind you make at someone you're performing kindness for. I waved back. Della walked me to the car with my discharge papers and squeezed my hand before she let go. That night, alone in my own bedroom for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, I sat at my writing desk and opened the bottom drawer where I keep the things that matter. The deed to the house. My husband's will. The original copy of my own will, updated 6 years ago, leaving everything to my daughter, my younger child, who lives in Portland and calls me twice a week and has never once asked me what I'm worth. Also in that drawer, the phone number of my own attorney, a woman named Patricia, who I'd first hired when I was 45 to sort out a contract dispute with the school district. She had the particular gift of being frightening without raising her voice. I called her first thing Saturday morning. She listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for 3 seconds. I counted, and then she said, "Don't touch anything. Don't call the bank yourself yet. Don't speak to your son about any of this. Are you writing this down?" "I'm a retired educator," I told her. "I have been writing everything down since Thursday." She almost laughed. "Good. I'll be at your house Monday morning. Keep that front door locked." The weekend passed slowly. My son called Saturday afternoon, asked how I was settling in, mentioned offhandedly that he'd be by Monday to help me go through some paperwork. I told him I was very tired and would call him when I was ready for visitors. He paused just long enough to let me know he didn't like that, then said, Of course. Take all the time you need, Mom." I sat in my living room that Saturday evening with a cup of tea and the letter from the bank on the table in front of me. My husband's photograph hung above the fireplace, a picture from the summer we turned 50. Both of us sunburned and laughing at something just outside the frame. I don't remember what was funny. I remember that we were happy in a way that didn't need a reason. "I should have done this sooner," I said to him. He kept smiling. He always did. I thought about the years after he died, how my son had grown quieter and then, slowly, more present, showing up more, calling more, asking questions I hadn't thought to find strange. "What's the house worth now? Do you have a financial advisor? Have you updated your will recently?" I had answered every question with the openness of a woman who believed her family was simply caring for her. Grief makes you want to believe in people. Grief makes you soft in all the places you should be careful. But I was soft for too long, and he knew it. Monday came gray and cold. Patricia arrived at 9 in the morning with a briefcase and a look on her face that I recognized from courtroom documentaries, the look of someone who has already decided how this ends. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and opened a folder. "Here's what he did," she said. "He had used a medical power of attorney form one I had signed 8 years ago after my husband's death to allow my son to make healthcare decisions in an emergency. A narrow document for a specific purpose. Somehow, it had been retyped. The language expanded. The scope widened. The notary signature at the bottom belonged to a woman who had also, it turned out, notarized 3 other suspicious documents for a different family in the same county 6 months earlier. Patricia had found that out in 2 days of phone calls. She set the pages on the table with the precision of someone placing a chess piece. "This is fraud," she said. Straightforward, provable, and honestly a little insulting in how sloppily it was done. "He always believed I wouldn't look," I said. She nodded. "They usually do. We worked for 3 hours. New documents. A revocation of the altered power of attorney, filed that day. A formal request to the bank to reverse the wire transfer and freeze all accounts pending a fraud investigation. A call placed, with me present, to the hospital's patient advocate office to formally request the records of who had accessed my medical information during my stay and who had spoken to my care team without my knowledge. At the end of it, Patricia folded her hands on the table and said, "You're going to want to consider a restraining order." "Not yet," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "I want to see what he does first," I said. "People show you who they are when they think the ground is still solid." She considered this. 48 hours, she said. "Then we go to the police regardless." He came that afternoon. I heard his car in the driveway and went to the front window to watch him get out. He walked up the path with his usual confidence, the stride of a man who has never truly faced a consequence. My own son knocked on my door, and I let him wait a moment before I answered. "Mom," he smiled. "You look better. How's the hip?" "Improving," I said. He came in without being invited, the way he had since he was a teenager. He moved through my living room with the ease of someone taking inventory. "I was thinking," he said, dropping onto the sofa, "that now that you're home, we should sit down and talk about the long term. The house is a lot for one person. With your mobility situation. I'd like to talk about the wire transfer," I said. He stopped. The room was very quiet. The furnace clicked on. Somewhere outside, a car passed on the street. "What wire transfer?" he said, but his voice was a half step slower than it should have been. "The $340,000 from my savings account," I said. "Authorized through the power of attorney You had retyped and notarized by a woman who is currently under investigation by the state bar. He looked at me the way people look at someone when they're trying to figure out how much they know. Mom, he said, you don't understand how these things work. The money was moved to protect it. I spoke to Patricia this morning, I said. Everything has been frozen. The transfer has been reported. She'll be filing the formal complaint with the district attorney's office on Wednesday. He stood up, not quickly, slowly, the way a person stands when their legs aren't entirely sure they should. You don't want to do this, he said. His voice had changed. The warmth was gone. What was underneath was something I had suspected but never fully seen. You have no idea what this will do to this family. I know exactly what it will do, I said. It will tell the truth. His jaw tightened. You're confused. You're still recovering. The fall, I said quietly, that you called the hospital about 2 hours before it happened. The silence that followed was the longest of my life. I watched his face move through several things. Calculation, then anger, then something colder. You can't prove that, he said. Hospital phone records are not difficult to subpoena, I said. Patricia was very clear about that. He picked up his keys from the coffee table. His hand was steady, but only because he was making it steady. I'm not your enemy, he said. I was trying to help you. You were trying to help yourself, I said. There's a difference. I spent 31 years teaching children to understand the difference. He left without saying anything else. He pulled the door shut behind him, which surprised me. I expected him to leave it open, the way angry people do, but he closed it carefully, almost gently, which was somehow worse. It meant he was still thinking, still calculating. I stood in my hallway for a moment with my hand on the walker, listening to his car back out of the driveway. My heart wasn't pounding. I noticed that and was grateful for it. My daughter called that evening. She's lived in Portland for 12 years, teaches environmental science at a community college, and has never once in 12 years asked me what my house is worth. She called because she felt something she told me later that's exactly what it was. Just a feeling, the kind that sits on your chest until you pick up the phone. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, in a voice I recognized from when she was 8 years old and deeply, correctly certain that something was wrong, Mom, are you safe right now? Yes, I said. I have the locks changed tomorrow morning. I'm booking a flight. You don't have to. I'm already looking at tickets, she said. Don't argue with me. I get that from you. She arrived Wednesday morning, and the house felt different the moment she walked in. Not safer. Exactly, I had already made it safe. But warmer. She sat with me at the kitchen table while I went through the documents with her, page by page. She didn't cry, which I appreciated. She asked sharp, careful questions, which I appreciated more. She held my hand at the end without making it sentimental. Do you want me to talk to him? She asked. No, I said. This isn't yours to carry. She looked at me steadily. Mom, it became mine the moment he hurt you. Patricia filed with the district attorney on Wednesday afternoon as promised. The fraud case moved faster than I expected, because it wasn't, as it turned out, the first time. The notary who had signed the falsified documents had a small, quiet history of this 3 other elderly clients in the county over 4 years, all with adult children who described their parents as declining and in need of support. 2 of those families had settled privately. One of the victims had died before the case went anywhere. Mine would not. The police came on a Thursday. 2 officers. They were professional and quiet and treated me like a woman who knew what she was talking about, which I found unexpectedly moving. I gave them my documentation, my attorney's contact information, and the name of Della, the nurse, who had already submitted a written statement about the pre-fall phone call. They took everything carefully. The way people handle things they intend to use. My son was arrested on a Friday morning. His wife was questioned for 6 hours and released, though Patricia told me the investigation into her role was ongoing. He did not call me. I did not expect him to. What I did not expect was the letter. It arrived 4 days after the arrest, handwritten, 3 pages. He wrote that he was sorry. He wrote that the finances had gotten away from him, that the business he'd invested in had collapsed, that he'd panicked and made choices he couldn't undo. He wrote that he loved me. He wrote that he never intended for the fall to happen the way it did. A sentence I read 4 times and set down without finishing. I did not write back. I set the letter in the folder where I keep my evidence, because even an apology can be a document. My daughter stayed for 2 weeks. We sorted through the mail together, ate breakfast at the table every morning, watched old movies on the couch with a blanket between us. One afternoon, she drove me to Patricia's office to sign the final version of my updated will. My daughter is my executor now. My grandson, her son, 12 years old and serious in the way quiet children often are, is the secondary beneficiary. There is no ambiguity in the document. There is no room for reinterpretation. Patricia made sure of that. On her last evening before flying back to Portland, my daughter and I sat on the back porch with tea as the sun came down behind the neighbor's oak tree. The air was cold enough to see your breath, but neither of us wanted to go in yet. "Are you going to be all right here alone?" she asked. "I've been alone for 8 years," I said. That's not what I asked. I thought about it honestly, the way she deserved. "Yes," I said. "I think for the first time in a long while, I actually will be." She reached over and squeezed my arm, and we sat there as the sky went from orange to gray to the particular blue-black of an Indiana October evening, the kind of sky you don't forget. In the weeks that followed, I made quiet changes. I hired a part-time helper, a woman named Gloria, who came 3 mornings a week and who, I discovered quickly, had strong opinions about crossword puzzles and weak opinions about reality television, which meant we got along fine. I spoke to my financial advisor, my real one, and restructured everything. I donated a portion of the recovered funds, once the wire transfer was reversed, to a legal aid organization that helps elderly victims of financial abuse. It wasn't a large amount, but it was mine to give. My hip healed slowly. By December, I was using a cane instead of the walker. By January, I had mostly stopped needing the cane, though I kept it by the door out of habit. Some things you hold on to not because you need them, but because they remind you of what you came through. I visited the elementary school where I began my career 40 years ago this past spring. I sat in the parking lot for a while and looked at the building. New paint, but the same brick, same big windows overlooking the playground. I thought about the first class I ever taught 22 10-year-olds who were, collectively, more honest than most adults I've known since. Children tell you when something is wrong. They don't know yet that telling the truth costs something. I drove home. I made tea. I sat at my writing desk and opened the drawer with the things that matter. And I looked at what was in it now, the deeds, the will, the new documents with my actual signature on them, the ones that cannot be altered without my knowledge and my hand. I am 72 years old. My hip aches when the weather changes. My son is awaiting trial in a county courthouse 20 minutes from the house where I raised him. My daughter calls me on Sundays and Wednesdays both, now. My granddaughter sends me voice messages that last 30 seconds and contain approximately 6 relevant words, and the rest pure laughter, which is more than enough. I was not pushed down those stairs and left for dead. I was pushed down those stairs and left to get up. Those are not the same thing. What I want you to take from this, if you are listening, if you are someone's aging parent or grandparent or aunt, if you have ever signed something because someone you trusted handed you a pen, is this: your name on a document is not just ink. It is your history, your labor, your right to decide what happens to what you've built. Do not let anyone hold that pen for you without knowing exactly what you're agreeing to. Find an attorney you trust, Not your family's attorney, your own. Check your accounts, read what you sign, and if something in you goes quiet and watchful when a person speaks. The way I went quiet the day I lay on that hospital floor and watched my son's wife's face listen to that silence. It knows things before the rest of you catches up. I am not bitter. I want to be honest about that, because people expect bitterness, and I understand why. But what I feel, sitting here in this house that is entirely mine again, with the October light coming through the kitchen window and Gloria arguing gently with the crossword puzzle in the next room, what I feel is clear. Clear the way water is clear after silt settles. Clear the way a room feels after you open all the windows. I chose myself. Later than I should have, but not too late. It is never too late. And if this story found you today, if you recognize something in it, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. You may not know who that person is, but they will know, when they hear it, that they were meant to.